Common howdy and welcome to today's FARG Motorpool. It's a bit windy, so you might not hear me over the wind, but it will do once we start working inside the garage. So what are we looking at today? And it's this. This is a Hotchkiss M201. It's basically a very faithful copy of the Willys Jeep that was made by the French company Hotchkiss Brandt, and also known as Willys Overland of France, in the 1950s and 60s. So what we're going to do today is we're going to be looking at the braking system on it. So this is my Jeep that's been parked up for a while. The rear wheels make a bit of a squeaking noise when you're reversing. Also when you're applying the brakes, there's quite a sort of a howling coming out the back. So it's time that we had a look at this. So this is exactly the same as what you get on a Willys Jeep. There really isn't any difference on the rear axle, so you can look at this video and learn for works on your own Willys wartime Jeep, or indeed if you've got Hotchkiss as well. So let's crack on and have a look at the brakes. So here at the rear we've got drum brakes there behind this rim. We need to get to those, and to do that we can leave the wheel on actually, but we're actually going to take it off because it makes it easier, and then we need to undo this. This here is the drive shaft that goes through into the middle of the axle, and that is going to get in our way unless we take it out. Underneath are some nuts, and we'll take that drum off and we'll have a look at the brakes. What am I expecting to find? Just dried out brakes, I expect. If there's any leakage or contamination on those brake shoes that we've got in there, then we'll replace them. So follow me on the video and you'll be able to do this on your Willys or Hotchkiss Jeep if you're starting to experience any sort of brake problems on the rear axle. Right, so here's all the tools that we're going to need to do the job. Now, hopefully I've brought them all with me as I'm working remotely today, as you can tell, because this isn't my usual workshop. There's the Jeep. So we've got a socket set, metric, we've got some screwdrivers, assorted spanners. Hopefully we will not be using the chisel, but you never know. I've got some parts that I brought along just in case for us to have a look at. Some electric hand tools, hammers, set of brake shoes in case the ones are really badly contaminated that are on there, because goodness knows how long they have actually been there. A set of maul grips, very important, and this is my new purchase from a well-known auction website. This is for retensioning the springs inside the brakes that act on the brake shoes. You'll see it when we try to use it. First time I've used this kind of tool, I usually just use one of these. If this works, fantastic. If it doesn't, it's going in the bin. Over here we have our spider to take the nuts off, a largish adjustable spanner for anything that's going to be bigger than the ones that I brought down here. We are going to clean everything, so we've got an old toothbrush, and this is fantastic brake cleaning material. I use it all the time. Wonderful stuff. We've got some brake fluid. I believe in here is a .4, so I've got to carry on using a .4. If you're in there on a sort of .5, etc., you really don't want to mix them, so you've got to stay to one fluid. So I believe it's a .4, but I've brought some of that. And the wonderful one-man brake and clutch bleeding aid. You don't really need a fancy kit. I've actually had fancy kits, and I've gone back to this every time. Just simple to use and straightforward. Pair of rubber gloves because we don't want to get covered in all the detritus. So there we go. Not really many tools. There's the Jeep. Let's get it jacked up and get that back wheel off. The one key tool that we will need, that's not readily available on the shelf of Halfords maybe, is one of these, and this is what I call a box spanner. Usually they don't have the handle on, I've just put that on myself, and this is to undo the largest nut that's holding on the brake drum inside of the braking system. So we are definitely going to need that. Top tip as well, put a piece of cardboard down. Don't just work on a dirty surface. This one isn't particularly dirty, but there's probably gravel and dust and maybe dirt. So everything I take off, we're going to put into a container, or very clearly place it on a piece of cardboard so we can pick it back up and reassemble it. If you've never done this before and you're concerned about mixing up nuts and bolts and goodness knows what, then just get a Sharpie and just draw a circle on the piece of cardboard and say wheel nuts, place them. Drive shaft nuts, bolts, sorry, and put them in a circle. That way you can't really sort of go wrong. Taking these wheel nuts off, you will find that originally, and it may have changed on your Jeep due to people making alterations or improvements, they may say, that the wheel nuts on the passenger side are what I would describe as normal, so therefore to undo them is anti-clockwise, to do them up is clockwise. On the opposite side, which is the driver's side, the wheel nuts are anti-clockwise, so you do exactly the opposite to get the nuts off. I've taken this to a garage in the past to have a tyre changed. I took my eye off of the technician for a moment, and he was absolutely hammering the nuts on the other side, in fact tightening them up and not undoing them, and he actually ruined them, so it was an absolute nightmare to get the nuts off and replace them. So do be aware. Now, how can you tell? One, you can just look at the thread, which I think is pretty straightforward, or handily the nut should have a little recess halfway down the body. Let's go around the other side and have a look. I think you can see on this one here, see there's a little a notch cut out, and these notches are cut out all the way around the edge of this nut, indicating to me that this is an anti-clockwise nut. Okay, so hopefully if yours maintains this, you should on the driver's side have these nuts on all wheels. On the opposite side is what I would describe as normal. To speed things up, the spanner that I'm using, or spider, I've put a bit of yellow tape on there so I know which size goes on to that nut, so for quite quick application rather than having to try them all. It's a 19mm, it should be. So let's put that on there and give it a go. So this isn't the original wheel that came on the Jeep. You can just about see WOF, Willys Overland of France. It's actually got a date on it, 1961. The Jeep's actually 1962 apparently, due to the production record. So yeah, I think this is all makes sense. This would be sat in the factory ready to go onto this Jeep. Also interesting, you've still got the original tyre cap, the valve caps. These here are ones that come off and they can actually be turned round, and then it can be used to get rid of or take out the valve inside of there with this little key on the end. So that's quite nice originality to see. The tyre is actually original as well. I took these off when I bought it. I've kept them to one side, but now you can actually see just very faintly starting to get some very small hairline cracks. They are the Goodyear tyre, which is a much softer tyre than the Kleber that you usually find on the Hotchkiss. I will be changing over to my set of Klebers soon. This was really put back on for display purposes, and so it is a general service G800 or a general service tyre, and it's a 6.5 R16. I think that's that R16's always the problem, trying to get tyres of that sort of dimension. So nice tyre actually. So we'll take that off and then we'll be looking at this. In the middle here, this is the drive shaft, that goes all the way through to the axle. We'll see when we take it out. It's held by 6 bolts that we'll be taking out, and you might wonder what these two are. So many people that may have had their drive shafts replaced might not have these still on here. So these are from the original vehicle, and these are extractors. So what happens is if this is stuck or it's caught in the axle, then what we can do is these can be loosened off and then wound in, and by winding these in it actually causes pressure and pops the drive shaft out. So this should come away quite easily, hopefully, but yeah, that's what those two elements are. Right, so tyres off. You never knew there was so much to taking a tyre off of a Jeep. Now what we're looking at is the inside now. This is an early rim. Well, as I said, it's a 1960s rim, and you will see that it's actually got studs in it all the way around, which is sort of a leftover from the World War II Jeep. So this is quite an early rim in the production run. What I am looking for now is any deposits on the inside of the rim. This is absolutely telltale. If we've got any brake leakage, then we will find that it'd be dripping on the inside of the rim or on the tyre. So looking at it, the tyre looks pretty good. It was just general sort of detritus from the years of being in storage, but nothing to worry about. Yet there are some slight traces here, but that's not fluid, that's just where I've put grease. I always make sure I put a nice lot of copper grease in and around on the studs and on the backing plate to make sure the wheel comes away easily. So wherever I've been, I'm always putting copper grease, and that way I know that I've been inspected it and it's looking good. So I'm going to use a power tool. I don't really use these very often, certainly for disassembling things is okay, but when you're putting things back together, you can't really sometimes tell what the torque is out of these, so it's best to do it by hand. So just for expediency, to get these bolts out, we're going to use the drill. So it's 15. There we go. So it's a 15. Make sure we're undoing it. I'm not doing it up, and we'll just rattle these off. Okay, it's quite a long bolt, so that was why I was using that. What I'm doing now is I'm just checking the thread. Okay, thread looks dirty. I have to clean that up, but I'm just checking that we've got the full length of the bolt and these haven't snapped, because they can. They're not cross-threaded at all. No, that's looking pretty good. Putting in a little container here so it doesn't roll around on the floor and we lose anything. Yeah, we'll do a bit of a clean, I think. Okay, they shouldn't take any more than that. If they're harder to undo, some sort of underlying issue maybe. Okay, yeah, dirty still. And the final one. Right, that's out. Now we're just going to pull the drive shaft. Oh, that came easy. The drive shaft out. So there we go. What you can see underneath is the large nut, and you can actually see now there should be a gasket on here. Ah, it's still there. It's a very, very fine paper one, so I'm going to be quite gentle with that. Pull that off. Okay, that's good. Just kept the gasket intact. Should put a fresh one on really. Not sure I brought one with me. So we keep pulling this out, and now the telltale moment. There we go. There are the drive splines on the end. So what we're looking for here is wear. So are they unevenly worn? Are they snapped? Are they chewed? Are they twisted? So you can break these relatively easily. I think the one that usually goes is on the driver's side because it's longer, and so therefore it sort of gets more sort of twist in the whole element and it snaps. Those are quite straightforward. Once that does snap, you pull what's left out. You need to take the back off of the diff, you can see in there, and then you get in and you knock it out with a screwdriver. Then wash the entire rear axle out thoroughly with fluid to get rid of any swarf, and then run round a magnet to pick any other bits up before you place the new one in. So there we go. It's an original one as well. I don't know if I can't see any markings on it at the moment, but yeah, that's looking in really good nick. So we're going to go and put that away somewhere safe because we don't want. So here we are with our next set of tools. The special box spanner. We have a hammer. We have the chisel that I said I didn't really want to use, but I think we are going to anyway, and a screwdriver. So with these tools, we're now going to remove these two retaining large nuts. There's one here. Then there is a washer behind it, and then we should be able to get at the secondary nut, and then that will then help us undo these, and then this entire drum should come away, hopefully, fingers crossed, quite easily. So first of all, I've got to find the bent over washer tab. So there it is at the bottom, so I've just got to hammer that there and open this out flat. We've bent the tab back and out the way. What I would suggest is, I've seen some of these in the past because I've owned quite a lot of Jeeps, and these have been bent forwards and back and forwards and back and all over the place, and they turn out to be quite chewed up. So the best thing is to really try and get a new bendable washer to go in there every time you're doing this. We're not going to this time because this tab I think was new last time I did it. So now we've done that, we can now put in the box spanner, and hopefully with a swift tap downwards we should be able to get this nut to start. In fact, yeah, okay, there we go. So on with the gloves because it's been a bit mucky now. Make ourselves a bit of room. A nice piece of clean cardboard here. And what we're going to do is, a bit of cloth here as well to clean my hands. We're going to take these nuts off. So there's the first one. So don't worry, I'll be going through sort of what you need to do when you put these back on to make sure you get the right torque. So there is the nut. I'm just inspecting it to see that it's in good condition. It does, it's not gnarled sometimes, we can just about see. Some of the technicians, we'll call them in the field, would have used a chisel, and they sometimes dig them into the edge of these and absolutely hammer them to get them to come off, and then that chews these up, which doesn't help because it ruins the face. So a few of these up your sleeve as well would help. So we're going to place that down. So that's number one, that came off. So this is in order now on this piece of cardboard. That's number one. So then we need to get the actual bendable washer out. I usually find 2 screwdrivers for this, so I'm going to use the chisel, a screwdriver, and then you just waggle these around, he says. I'm going to go and get another screwdriver. There's our washer. So this is the bendable washer, and you can see on this one, notice there's a little tab here, a bent tab, and that's facing inwards. Okay, so we've got to make sure we replicate that when we put it back on. It's not too badly chewed, so we'll be able to use that one again. So I'm placing that face down, so it's the same direction as I took it off, so I absolutely can't get confused. And then we've got our second nut that's in there. Now there shouldn't be a bent washer on that one, it's only on the outside, so hopefully this should go on, and this shouldn't be too tight. The reason is, when it was done up, you don't want to do it too tight because it actually puts pressure on the bearing. So this should, there we go, maybe, could be a little bit loose, that one, but we'll just undo that with our fingers. Absolutely, looks really good, nice and clean, and that goes face down on the cardboard again. So what we're left with now is there is another washer in there, and behind that is the bearing. So you can pull that washer out with the screwdriver. I'm not actually going to bother. What I'm going to do now is to make sure that I've got enough room here, and I'm going to take that drum off. So fingers crossed, fingers behind it, waggling it slightly. Watch how easy it comes off. Now, if we'd had an issue with it, we'd have to put a puller on it. So the puller, we would make up a piece of metal go between 2 sets of the nuts, put the puller on the middle, and then do it up and pull it off. But this one's just coming off. A treat. Try and keep it horizontal, if not perfectly upright. The reason is, in there is the bearing, and we don't want that to drop out. Now there's one in the back as well, because there's 2, it's the front and back. The back one usually is sort of pressed in, so that's fine. That front one can come out quite easily. I'm going to put that to one side. In fact, we're not. We are going to look on the inside of the drum to look for wear. Now, to be honest, that looks pretty good. Not adverse. It's not rusty. That's one good thing. It's not completely worn. There's a couple of trace marks in there, but that's not too bad at all. Now what we've got is the braking system. So first thing we're doing is we're looking at the brake shoes. So they're quite polished, but that's not a problem. We're looking at the depth against these studs. So it's showing us how much meat we've got left on these brake shoes. And what you do not want to do is contaminate the surface of these brake shoes. So you don't really want to touch them with your gloves. It's just got the grease on it that you've just got all over you. So either change your gloves or make sure you don't touch it. So I'm just looking at these, the rivets. There's quite a bit of meat on that. There's quite a bit of meat, certainly a bit more on that. Now what you will notice is they're slightly different. The front one has a brake lining that travels nearly the full, if not the full length of that brake shoe. On this side, this is the back, and that only has half, so it doesn't do the entire distance. So there are front and rear brake shoes, and it's good to take note of when you've taken them off. We'll make sure that they go back on like that. Okay, so wheels off, drums off, and now we're looking at the brakes. So, on the internet, there's some interesting videos out there of people changing drum brakes, and I can't say I particularly agree with all of them. Some of them seem slightly misleading, but let me just go through the principles of why. You've got 2 shoes. You've got one with a longer brake lining, a bigger brake lining, and one with a smaller brake lining. The larger one needs to go face towards the front.
I can't see any weeping underneath, so I think the cylinder's okay, and the spring looks quite rigid, which is fantastic. Now what can happen is if you leave these sitting around for ages, and you can actually see here I've got water, or muddy water has managed to get into the braking system. What happens is you get a slight amount of rust on this pivot point and this one here, then that binds the brake. So what happens is the brake cylinder pushes the brake out and it stays out. It's staying out because of the resistance due to the corrosion in these 2 points. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take this spring off, we're going to release these off and then manually move them and check that they're nice and free. If they're too tight, then what we will do is we'll clean these out and we'll see what we can do. If not, on the back is a nut and we can undo these and loosen these off, and then we will put the most tiniest amount of copper grease, tiny, so it will not heat up and leak anywhere, and we'll just put that on there just to give it that little bit of movement. Okay, all quite tight, and so you've got this side hooking around the back of the rear shoe and that's hooking around the front, so we're going to put that on the cardboard exactly as we found it, so it goes back in the same way. Okay, so now the shoes are off, let's have a look and see what resistance we've got. So there's hardly anything in that, that's really good news. And then this, yes, is quite stiff. So what we're going to do is we're going to clean these up, and then, oh, that's good, it's coming apart like that. That's not too bad actually, but yeah, we'll give those a quick clean and we'll go from there. Got a can of brake fluid, brake cleaner. I'm just going to give a good dousing there. Right. Give it a bit of a... And also we can do the faces. Okay, so we've put the tiniest amount of copper grease in on that shoe. Tiniest amount, hardly anything, but that now means that these shoes are moving pretty easily. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put these back in. We'll get somebody to press the brakes down and we'll see how these are coming in and hopefully going back in again. So shoes sat back on. We've made sure that this tang is fitting in the slot properly on the left and on the right. Shoes are sat nicely. There's actually adjusters in there as well that are pulling the shoes back and forth, but what we're going to do is we're going to put the wheel on and rotate it and just see what those adjusters are doing first of all. So it might be quite sensible to have a look at these whilst they're here. There it is back here, and check they're nice and loose. Might clean those as well. Black cat in a coal cellar back here. Very difficult to see, but there we go, there's the adjuster. So we've made sure that that adjusting, tightening nut is loose. So what we've done is we put also cleaner on there and a bit of a toothbrush cleaning it around. It's a 14mm. Put that on and you can just see that it is nice and loose. And this is the actual adjuster, is the bit in the middle. We're going over this side. Yeah, he's loose as well. So we're really good to go. So we're going to put that drum back on now, and then we will adjust those brakes. Usually you use a feeler gauge, and that goes in this slot here in the drum. Sometimes these slots get dented over, and there is set measurements, so I would consult the Willys Jeep technical document. I haven't got that with me. All I'm going to do is do it by feel, so I just want the brush, the brakes just touching, just brushing slightly, both on the forward and the back. I haven't had an accident. This is grease. We're going to be placing the grease in and packing around the bearings in there. Between the two bearings there's a bit of a space, sort of a void on the inside. We're going to get a lot of grease inside of there, so you want to make sure this stays lubricated. So it really is dig in with a nice pair of clean gloves, and we're going to place it inside and on the leading face of that. In fact, let's take the whole thing out and get it completely covered in grease. Which is great. The bearing went over quite easily, and there was a washer. I was being a bit lazy, should have taken it out, but there's a washer there, and you've got to make sure that the little recess in the washer fits down that little slot there, otherwise the washer sort of falls on the floor, which it didn't, but do get a bit mucky doing this. So that's back on now, and that's rotating really nicely. So what we're going to do now is put back on our first nut. So we're going to the cardboard and we're bringing that back over. Look at this, all done in order. Isn't this wonderful? So now, hand's going to get a bit dirty. On with the first. You may ask, you're doing this up, that's great, but how do you know when it is tight or too tight? Because you don't want to put too much stress on those bearings in there. So we're going to put on one of the nuts for now. And what we're actually looking for is to do it up fairly with our fingers, okay? And we're actually going to rock the wheel. This does help if we had the tyre on it, but we're actually going to rock it just very, very slightly back and forth. And when the rock has more or less been eliminated, then we will do it up one extra flat. So I'm just going to tighten this up a little bit more. I've got tiny little movement there coming in and out. Probably can't even see it on the camera. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do one more flat. So that means I need to move this flat to there. So round it goes. There we are. Excellent. There we go. So I'm going to double check that. So what we're going to do is we're going to loosen it back off, because sometimes that pulls the drum into its final position. So there, we're back to where it was before. Spinning around nice and quietly. The tiniest little movement on it, and then we're just going to go in. There we go. Deformable washer back on. It had a little tang, if you remember, so we've made sure that slides again down the little slot there. And then we've put the final nut on and we've tightened that back up, putting a fair amount of force on that because that is now holding the whole thing. So we're just going to check again. What you don't want to happen is when you're tightening this up, it moves the one behind and the whole lot tightens up. It makes the brakes harder. That should not happen, but maybe it could. So we're just double checking each turn that we've got a nice free wheel there. What we'll do is we'll bend this back over, put the drive shaft back in, put the wheel back on, and we'll do some brake tests. There we go. Wasn't that hard, was it, really? What we're going to do now is just make sure that this drive shaft is lined up properly. You can see here, now remember we've got these extraction nuts, they need to push off of a flat surface on the back. So you will see that this part of the hub is recessed. So what we need to do is just rotate the wheel, there we go, and then this extraction nut is working off of a flat surface. We'll check this one round here, it's doing exactly the same. That is good to go. So we'll get that gasket just gently lined up. We've got the bolts down here, which we'll just give a wipe off, and then we'll put them back in. What torque do you put them in at? To be honest, I just put them in and nip them up with my hand. I don't know what torque that is. Baz torque, maybe. Check it out in the Willys handbook. Not actually got one here at the moment, but I just really do these up pretty tight. And I always replace these little washers on the back. They can snap or you lose them. It is imperative that you put those in because that keeps a nice tension on the bolts to make sure that they don't undo.
Don't forget to tighten up those brake adjusters at the back to make sure that they don't move any further. Best to put 2 spanners on, one on the actual adjuster itself and then do the nut, which is the 14mm. So they're tightened up nicely. I was rotating the wheel and you can just faintly hear a slight rub, so therefore just backed it off even the tiniest amount more until that sort of noise just about went away. So therefore we know that these are pretty tight. Just had someone pressing on the brakes, trying them, and they went on absolutely perfectly. So what I'll do is I'll put the wheel back on, and that is more or less it. I will go over the other side and do the same. If I discover any problems, then I'll film it. If I don't, then happy days, and let's get this thing out and driving in what's left of the summer sun. So thanks for joining. Ta-ta for now. We're on the other side now, driver's side. Do you remember I said I wouldn't be back in the video if things went well? Well, they haven't really. On this side here, they are badly corroded here. I've had to really force that down. And this one is just not moving at all. It's absolutely rigid. So no wonder the brakes are squealing. So what we need to do is we'll try and clean these up and work these free. If not, we'll take this point out. Also, the actual wheel that came off, and I really didn't notice this until I got very, very close to it. You can just about see stress cracks coming. Now, I've seen people on the internet welding these, grinding it, welding it, and then putting them back on the vehicle. Personally, I wouldn't, to be honest, because if you've got a stress crack in here, there could be other stress cracks elsewhere. So the real thing is to just get good quality holes here, and they're not elliptical, and just replace the entire rim. There's a lot of these rims around, to be honest, and that's because many people are changing to the World War II split rims because they want to make their Hotchkiss look sort of World War II-esque. So you should be able to get these, but yeah, I didn't notice until I got very close. So it's a really good thing to once in a while do stuff like this, because then you start noticing issues you've got with your own kit.